primaries. So we are hopeful and expect to be able to host many more beginning in September. And we are sponsored by the Wahkiakum County Republican Party and the Wahkiakum County Democratic Party, working together for the good of our county, Wahkiakum, and all of the rural people in our community and in our state. So this event is also live streamed on YouTube. The channel is called Wahkiakum R&D Team. So welcome to everybody out there on YouTube. We're glad you're here. I'm Stephanie Lights. I am the principal of Wahkiakum High School and a mom of 4, sometimes 6, depending on how many kids we have living with us in the moment, but definitely a citizen of Wahkiakum County and excited to be here to support all of you. I will be the moderator for tonight's District 19 State Legislator Candidate Forum. And I'd like to take a minute and introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Jim Walsh, Republican, the incumbent for position 1. Running against him, we have Marianna Everson, Democrat, and Clint Bryson, Democrat. And then we have Brian Blake, who is the incumbent Democrat for position 2, and his challenger is here with us, Joel McIntyre, Republican. Thank you all for taking time out of your lives to join us and to let the people of Wahkiakum know more about you. I'd like to give you some rules for tonight's forum. All of the questions have been submitted ahead of time in response to a request we put out in the Eagle. There will be no questions taken from the audience. I will ask a question, then each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. With 15 seconds remaining, our timer will state 15 seconds. At the end of the 2 minutes, she will then state time's up. I will allow you to finish your thought, and then I ask that you respectfully be quiet. If a candidate has time remaining in his 2 minutes, they can continue speaking on a previous topic. There will be no banking of time for later. I will rotate the order in which all of you respond to questions. We are here to hear from only candidates, so we ask that you don't get information from anybody else. And due to our large number of panelists for tonight's forum, we will probably last a little longer than an hour, up to about 90 minutes. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Candidates, what I'm going to ask you to do is take 2 minutes to tell us about yourself and why you are running. And I'm going to ask Joel, will you go ahead and start?
I would. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Wahkiakum Republicans and Democrats who are putting this on. I'm from Wahkiakum County, so I know all of you personally, your friends and neighbors. And so thank you for doing this to educate the public. So I'm Joel McIntyre. I'm a longtime resident here of Wahkiakum County in Southwest Washington. I'm actually a 4th generation resident. My great grandparents came out here for the logging back in the day when logging was what it was. And I have my bachelor's in evolutionary ecology from Central Washington University. I have my master's in mathematics education from Western Governors University. I was a teacher at Wahkiakum High School for a few years in the middle school. I'm currently in the Marine Corps Reserves. I've been in for 9 years and been deployed overseas twice. And I just enjoy serving my community and being a part of the political process. I'm currently the chairman of the Wahkiakum County Republican Party, and I've sat out of the drafting of this forum. I've removed myself so I can just play the part of candidate. I'm not involved in bringing this up at all. But it is clear over the last several years that our district is changing. It's changing ideologically. It's historically been blue-collar, union-working Democrat stronghold in Washington State for a long time. But as parties change, as people change, as economies change, people will start to shift their political ideologies. And it's very clear that the political ideologies of the people in Southwest Washington are shifting. And they're shifting away from the standard Democrat platform and more towards a Republican platform. And that's the platform that I'm going to be running on.
Hey, thank you, Joel. I'd like to ask Brian Blake, will you please go next?
Sure. Yeah, Brian Blake from Aberdeen. My family great-grandfather got to Beaver Dam, Oregon in 1871, just on the other side of the river, just upriver. By 1888, the year before statehood, the Blakes had moved to Aberdeen. And the maternal side, the Hall family got to the Nasell, Napton area about 1910. And so I've always lived in Aberdeen, except when I've been in Alaska logging. The first 12 years of my work career was in the logging industry, and I was in a double fatality, kept logging, and took a tree to the head. I used to be 6'5", and so I'm no longer that tall, but decided that I got angry about public access to public land. And that's what really sparked my interest and got me contacting my legislators in the mid-90s. And I was able to work with my legislators to get a bill passed that ensured public access to the Elk River Natural Area Preserve for hunters and fishermen. And folks saw that activism and asked me to get involved. And I did that and was appointed to office and have been elected, I think, 8 or 9 times. And it's a fascinating job. I'm chair of the Rural Development, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Committee. And that's actually the job I wanted in the legislature, because I think
15 seconds.
are critical to the 19th district. Thank you for the invitation tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Next, I'd like to ask Jim Walsh. Will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks to the group for putting together the forum. I'm Jim Walsh. I've been the state representative for the 19th district, the seatmate to Brian Blake for 4 years, since 2016. I also live in Aberdeen. I have a small book publishing company. That's my business. And my wife, Jamie, and I have raised 5 kids here in Aberdeen. All went through Aberdeen High School. And we've been sort of very, very gradually restoring an old Victorian house in the Broadway Hill neighborhood of Aberdeen for almost 20 years. And it's still a work in progress. 4 years ago, I was elected to the legislature really to bring a new approach to how we handle public policy in Olympia for this part of the state. And I think we've been successful largely. My assignments in Olympia, I sit on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee that Brian chairs, but then I'm the ranking member on the State Government Committee, which primarily oversees elections and related topics. And I'm the assistant ranking on the Transportation Committee. And lately that's been taking a lot of my time in Olympia as we're trying to trim the budgets of the Transportation Department, the transportation budget, in the wake of the $30 car tabs initiative and other things. So my approach really is to bring a more limited government priority to Olympia and really try to whip into shape both the budgets and the policy that we do at the state level. And it's been a very interesting 4 years, and I'm interested in continuing the fight for the next few. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jim. Marianna, will you go next? Thank you. Clint, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to echo the other candidates in thanking the Republicans and Democrats for putting this on. I think it's a great show of cooperation. So my name's Clint Bryson, running for position 1 in the 19th. I'm a lifelong resident of Montesano, where I live with my wife Nancy and three daughters. I have 2 that are college age. My stepdaughter is going to be a sophomore at Montesano High School next year. And like many people in the district, when I graduated in high school in 1990, I had to make a decision what came next. For myself, that choice was electrical apprenticeship. I think I didn't want to take on massive debt. I enjoyed working with my hands, and turned out I was pretty good at it. I worked in that capacity until 2008, when I was asked to become a union representative for IBEW Local 76, where I now serve as assistant business manager. And during that time, I've advocated for my fellow workers on safety and health issues, healthcare, pensions, and economic development. And I think that's really what's brought me to this point, is my involvement in the process. I know what it's like to be in Olympia, lobbying on behalf or against something. I know what it's like to try to navigate some of the state programs and some of the difficulties we can have. One of my duties is assisting members, for example, with the recent challenges with the unemployment system. Workers' comp is another one where people often need help. In 2017, I became a Montesano City Councilman, and that's shown me a lot of what local governments face as far as mandates that come down from the state level and how you deal with those. I've served on the Finance, Public Works, Forestry committees, as well as the Shorelines Management Work Group. And it's something I really enjoyed, serving our citizens of our community. I think the top issues in this race, thank you. I think that jobs is number 1. I think that education and healthcare are right there as well. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. All right, our next question is, what would be your most important priority if you are elected? And for this one, I would like Jim, will you go ahead and start?
Sure. We are facing a severe budget crisis in Olympia. Because of the governor's lockdown in response to the COVID outbreak, we have had an economic recession is what we had. Something that was predicted for the last few years, but was basically triggered by this lockdown. And whereas for the last really almost 10 years, the state has consistently collected more tax revenue than projected on a quarter-to-quarter basis. We've always had a surplus. Now we are looking at it being in the red, where we have a shortfall, a budgetary shortfall. And of the 3 state budgets, and that is operating, transportation, and capital, the operating and transportation budgets are most directly affected by this. The capital budget's a little different for other reasons. And what we're staring at right now is on the basis of about $70 billion approximately for those 2 budgets, we have a shortfall of something like $9 billion. And what we need to do in the coming session is trim our sails in Olympia. We need to trim those budgets to match the revenues, the lower revenues that we're receiving from our various forms of taxes. And this is something we can do without cutting any essential services. It's something we did do last session with our transportation budget. As I mentioned, I'm the assistant ranking on that committee. So we negotiated a bipartisan transportation budget that took into account lower revenues there, largely because of the $30 car tabs initiative. We need to do that to the bigger operating budget in the coming session, and that will be job 1 as soon as we're in session again. We ought to be in session now doing it. It'll certainly be job 1 whenever we meet.
Thanks, Jim. Marianna, will you follow with your most important priority if elected? Okay, thank you, Marianna. Next, Clint, would you go ahead and share your priority?
Sure. As I mentioned in my opening, I think that jobs is an issue that should always be top of mind in this district. For far too long, we've had higher than average unemployment rates. Like everything else, though, the COVID crisis has magnified these problems. So clearly, the budget issues will be something that has to be addressed. There's a lot of speculation on what that shortfall is going to be. I heard the number 8.8 million, or excuse me, 8.8 billion this morning, which is very similar to what Jim had stated. And one thing that I think is very important is that we continue on with some of these critical infrastructure projects that can help us work our way out of this problem. I think that economic development needs to be top of mind. I think that growing our economy is not going to hurt people as bad as too many cuts would. So I think we need to be careful about what we look at for cost savings. There are already underway furlough programs, hiring freezes, but no one thing is going to be the answer to those problems. So for myself, I think that jobs is the answer. I think that we need to continue on with our educational programs that prepare people for these jobs. We have some really good community colleges and technical programs in our district. I want to continue to support those. I think we can do more preparing our high school students to succeed there. But it's also really important we recognize that a lot of people are, especially in our district, a lot of people are self-employed or work for small businesses. And I'm very concerned about them being the ones that fall through the cracks. In a lot of cases, they might not get the same support through some of the government programs. So we need to keep them in mind and make sure we're supporting them along the way as well.
15 seconds.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Okay, Brian, will you let us know your priority?
Yeah, thank you, Brian Blake. I think the others are right. I think we need to go into session, special session, and make adjustments to the budget. I mean, we know what we're facing, and the time is now. The sooner we get in and make adjustments, the better. And I think there's room with the rainy day fund and other dollars to make those adjustments in the budget that will help us for the new legislature when they go into a constitutional session in January to write a new budget. And I think the critical thing going into the next legislative session in January will be making adjustments, but spurring investment in our economy and jumpstarting our economy. The jobs like the Kalama plant, Northwest Innovations, and that kind of spurring that kind of private investment in Washington State will help restart the economy. Boeing is very close to getting their plane recertified. Aside from COVID, that's been a big hit. And we just need to get folks back to work safely and restart the economy. Also, Jim did mention the capital budget, and your 19th district delegation has done well for the district these last few years in bringing help and investment to infrastructure. So I hope to continue to do that.
Thank you, Brian. Joel, what's your priority?
Well, we are smacking the nail right on the head that the priority is going to be the economy and the budget. The issue with the budget and the economy is absolutely critical. So everyone has kind of their pet projects, their side projects they all want to work on. But the thing is, if we don't get a roaring economy back, we don't get anything. Nothing else comes after that. So we need to get that economy going. But it's going to come by allowing businesses to open back up and allow them the liberty to be able to make money and hire people and use the profit motives and normal business models to be able to get us back up again. If we are intent on saying, well, to fill this $8.8 billion budget hole, we need to tax businesses more, we need to tax individuals more, then that's money that's just adding insult to injury, being that the businesses have just been closed down. So many businesses have shut down, and now that they're barely limping back open, Democrat leadership in the House and the Senate is considering an increase in payroll taxes. That's not the fix for this problem. Every year, as Jim said, we've had record revenue coming into the state, and so they've just said, oh, they just think year after year the money is just going to keep coming and get bigger and bigger and bigger because that's what they've experienced. And now when the money dries up a little, they sit there with their huge bloated budget and say, hey, come on, that's not fair. We got to get some of that. So that they're looking for ways to get the money out of the private sector and in there. It is clear cuts have to be made. They must absolutely be made. There's no question about it.
15 seconds.
And if we want to see what I know we're going to see is people calling for an income tax and taxing the richest among us, you're going to just see them go to Texas like we do with every other failed state.
Time's up.
Okay, thanks, Joel. All right, our next question. How will you reach across the aisle to get your legislative priority passed? And for this one, I'd like Brian, would you be willing to start?
Absolutely. You know, reaching across the aisle is actually a hallmark of what I've done in my career in the legislature. I work all four corners and the executive branch offices to make things happen. And you will see the legislation I sponsors most frequently has broad bipartisan support. And it's just something that I do. I have a fellow legislator, Mia Gregerson from up north, doesn't necessarily have an ag background, but she wanted to work on food security and she was having a tough time. And, you know, I talked with ag folks and other legislators and, you know, they wanted to just not sit down and talk. Now, I won't take credit for that. I will give the credit to Representative Gregerson. She's a stick-to-it legislator, and with my insistence to some of the other partners, this last year, she was at the table testifying on her bill with the broad support of the Farm Bureau for food security, and we were able to pass that legislation. So, as chair of the Rural Development, Agricultural, and Natural Resources Committee, I think there's no other committee in the legislature where a chairman gives a party a clear voice in the committee, and that's what I plan to continue doing.
Thank you, Brian. Next, Joel, will you go ahead and respond to that question?
Yeah. First off, I've worked with Democrats ever since my college days when the college Republicans, that was us, met with the college Democrats, and we wanted to host a joint debate at Central Washington University. People that ideologically you disagree with, but you want to get something done. Case in point, this forum tonight, the county Republicans and the county Democrats know that a forum like this is good for discourse and for helping educate the public. So we work together to get these things done. It's a little bit different when it comes to political battle. In Washington state, the governor, the Senate, and the House are all Democrat. So when the Republicans were a super minority and they were a super majority, there was no reaching over the aisle for us. They never invited the Republicans to have a say, to have a voice in anything. They passed things clean, party line. Then a few years back, the state had a major swing and the Republicans took the Senate. Now they had to start working together. because it was out of necessity. It had to be done. It didn't have to be done before. And too often I've seen that when working together is being mentioned, it means that, oh, I'm raising taxes a little bit. I'll work with Democrats. So we don't raise taxes majorly. We'll just raise them a little bit. Oh, you want to take some of my guns away, not all the guns? Okay, we'll work together. So we just take some of the guns away or add some regulations. So it seems like working together in Washington State on the Republican side always gets the short end of the stick. And that on the other side, they seem to do everything by party line vote. They now have the majority in the Senate again. And too little do I see reaching over the aisle on my side. The people of this district, they're not in the mood of moderation and equivocation. They want results.
15 seconds.
They want direction. And so I'm giving them that direction of lower taxes, more local regulation over your own economies, and more personal freedom. And that's what I'm going to stand for. And if I have to work together with the other side for those things, I definitely will.
Time's up.
Thanks, Joel. Marianna, will you answer that question?
Fifteen seconds.
Thank you. Clint, how will you reach across the aisle?
Sure. I think that's probably one of the most important questions in this district, because the largely rural districts like the 19th, we have more in common with our neighbors than, regardless of their party affiliation, than possibly other parts of the state. I think it's important to remember that we do have common interests. Good policy is good policy. It shouldn't be limited to one part or the other. And I've found through my job as a union representative that if you want to get the best outcome, you're going to include everybody who's a stakeholder. Often I'm in a room where, business might have one motivation, labor might have another, but we need each other. We need to create a relationship where we can work together and get the best outcomes. So I would say a big part of that, first, you have to seek input from others. Whether you need it to pass a vote or not, that's something that's important that you should still be doing. You should be listening, because you might learn something from the other side. So that's where I'm at on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Jim, your thoughts?
Oh, it's going to be really interesting, Stephanie. I think that the budget crunch is going to make lots of strange bedfellows. And one of the things too is we go through these election cycles and things tend to be a little more partisan, and people send out mailers and they get billboards and they do all their different things. But the truth is, when you get to actually making policy and negotiating budgets in Olympia, the process is not incredibly partisan. In fact, the dynamics a lot are kind of between the two chambers. You know, the House tends to agree with each other on many things. And oftentimes when we go into subcommittees or conference committees and particularly to budget negotiations, it's the House negotiating against the Senate. It's not R's versus D's. And so we saw that already, as I've mentioned, with the transportation budget last session. I think we'll see it again on the budget negotiations that lie ahead of us. And the other thing too is, I mean, this really is an area in the budget negotiations coming up that the existing people in the legislature aren't used to. Most of them have only been there through the times of plenty. So I think it's going to be a new thing for everyone, that times are tighter now and we don't have those surpluses that we had for the last 8-10 years. So I think it is going to be very bipartisan because it has to be. And you know, when you put good policy across, it's inevitable you work with people from all sides. That's in the nature of the process. So rest easy. No matter how partisan the election cycles seem, those are the most partisan part of the legislative process. When you're in there making the sausage, it's a lot less partisan than it seems from the outside.
Yeah, I bet. So in education, we have a kind of a strategy we call the whip around, where everyone kind of quickly gives their answer. So I'd just like to take a moment and ask you, just as a follow-up, since many of you touched a little bit on budget cuts, if you did have to cut something to balance the budget, what would that be? So not taking the full 2 minutes, just a quick whip around, a few words about it. What would you cut? Clint, will you go ahead and start us off for that one?
Well, not having been a part of the budget process, I'm going to have to say we'd probably need to look at some of the capital projects and prioritize those because it's quite possible some of them could still be built, but maybe at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Marianna, what about you? Okay. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I think, you know, you saw at the end of this last session, as we anticipated COVID and passed budgets, and then the governor, we left town and the governor had to contemplate the budget. He cut things that were newer programs that weren't fully established. And many of those budget items were things that he dearly supported, but he understood. And so there are some cuts to be made to adjust budgets. I've been through tough budgets. I voted for the Dino Rossi budget when I first came into the legislature. So there's adjustments to be made.
Okay, Joel, what would you cut?
There is no entity so righteous that in this case that it should be not cut to some degree. I think it's a shame when a group or an individual legislature focuses on one, says we're cutting, all our cuts are going to that, but we're not touching anything else. Everything should be up for debate on the cut. Everyone should have to tighten their belt.
Okay, and Jim?
Well, I like what they call programmatic cuts. That means you don't cut any one agency. You go in and you prioritize the different projects that each agency is taking. So you don't have to cut ecology or fish and wildlife. What you do is you go into each of them and you cut particular programs. Brian talked about this a little bit, that aren't ready for prime time, that have development money attached to them but aren't actually doing anything yet. And you could save quite a bit going that way. But certainly my priority would be looking at the Department of Ecology, the Department of Labor and Industries, and the Department of, DNR, Natural Resources, which ought to be an agency that generates money to the general fund rather than taking money from the general fund. I'd look at those three agencies.
Okay, thank you. All right, question 4. Which transportation projects are important to commerce in the 19th district? And what have you done or will you do to ensure that these move forward? Marianna, will you start this one? Okay, Clint, what about you?
Sure. The two that really rise to the top are the one I've heard referred to as IWOW, the Industrial Way, Oregon Way project, the Great Separation down in Longview area, and the East Aberdeen Mobility Project. They both serve a function of trying to keep trains flowing into the ports, keeping our trucks and our commerce flowing. As I mentioned earlier, I think that should be a really high priority, is to spend our money on things that are going to help us get our economy jump started. Clearly, we do have other infrastructure needs. You know, we have to make sure that our bridges are safe and our roads are safe. But I think we're going to have to pick and choose which come first. So safety would be first and foremost. But as far as the two projects I mentioned, I think those should be top priorities.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
Yeah, not a lot of difference there. The IWOW project, which is the intersection of a bridge, two major roads, and a rail line in Longview. Anybody who's ever driven past it know the backups can be bad there. Is the biggest crunch we have for transportation infrastructure in the district. The other one that that Clint and Marianna have mentioned, the East Aberdeen Mobility Project, very similar. It's a surface street, it's a rail, and in that case, it's a retail plaza area. Also needs an overpass there. Those are both major projects. They've already been partially funded, but what we've tried to do in the last few years is bring some of that funding, which stretches out over like 10 years, bring it a little more current. So that's the battle on those two. Try to bring the funding closer to present so we can get out of the planning phase and actually start building stuff. You know, I always have thought we need to stretch either, you know, one of the state roads down into Cathlamet so that there's another way out of town if there needs to be. You know, the Highway 4 gets washed out and banged up a lot. That's another long-term project, but it's one that I've always kept in mind. It'd be good to have.
Thanks, Jim. Brian?
Yeah, you heard the two projects. I'm really proud of the IWOW project. In a tough negotiation, Senator Taco and I were able to get that $85 million in the budget for that project. That's critical. That project started being talked about in 1968 when Julia Butler Hansen was our congresswoman. And we're making that happen. And so really proud of that. You heard about the Aberdeen project. I think we've got to make a greater state contribution to the Puget Island Ferry. And I know the county commissioners have approached us about the state actually taking over that ferry and bringing some relief to the people of Wahkiakum County. And I would also point out that we've got a legal obligation from the Supreme Court on culverts and bridges in the state, and we need to make sure that those dollars come into the 19th district to continue to improve stream crossings.
Okay, Joel, what about you?
Well, no, a lot of good comments, not too much disagreement from the panel. I'll just say I don't know anyone who's anti-transportation, who holds a picket sign and says I'm against transportation. It's just a matter of where the dollars go and how they're generated, of course. And so I could speak a little bit to that. And that if we don't get the economy going, then the dollars don't come for the revenue. If the dollars don't come for the revenue, we don't get the roads. So I've traveled many states in the United States, and some of them have terrible roads, and some of that's weather related and just wear and tear. But one of the things that I've seen is that the states that have the most punitive taxes, the ones that tax their people like crazy, they think that they're getting all this money to build fantastic roads. But the thing is that then when they tax, the businesses dry up and the people leave, and then the money dries up, and then the roads break down, and then there's no one else to tax to make the roads. So there's this downward spiral of, well, if we made good roads, then maybe people would move back. Maybe they'd come back to Detroit, back to Cleveland, and then we could get the economy going. Well, it never would have happened if you guys wouldn't have been so hard on those taxpayers and made such an environment that's so hard for businesses to be able to thrive. If we can allow businesses, mom and pop shops, to be able to establish, thrive, not only will we keep the population infrastructure, we'll have the tax base to be able to continue to meet the needs of the road. It's not rocket science. We've done it. It's just a matter of keeping the right balance, about having the taxes that go to the roads rather than punishing those who are successful and then causing them to shut down business or up and leave. And then we don't have the tax revenue anymore.
Thanks, Joel. All right, our next question, completely changing subjects. What is your position on the comprehensive sex education bill? And I'm going to go ahead and ask Clint to start that one off.
Yeah, so this has been a hot topic, and rightly so. I know that some of these topics can be difficult to discuss. I have 3 daughters. I get it. It's not always comfortable, but unfortunately, first I want to say I do think that ideally sex ed would be taught in the home first. That would be ideal. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There's a lot of kids that don't get that kind of guidance at home. And so we found a society that the need to have it in the school system. That being said, I support fact-based, accurate educational materials. I wouldn't support materials that are not age appropriate. I know that's been some of the complaints. I went and read the bill when I first heard about the issue, when it was being debated. I don't see it in that legislation denoting, what curriculum is to be used. It's left up to the local school districts, which I support. I think the local school districts should have that control. I think parents should have the right to view it and make a decision on whether they want their children to participate. And I support the voters having their say on the referendum. It's going to go to referendum this fall, and it should. But I do support fact-based comprehensive sexual education, provided that it's age appropriate and accurate.
Thank you. Jim, will you speak to that question?
Oh, sure. Clint's completely wrong. The SB 5395 is a terrible piece of legislation. It does set parameters for what curriculum are acceptable. And currently, the only one that's acceptable that meets all the requirements of 5395 is one called the 3 R's curriculum. And I encourage anyone who's curious to just Google that and look it up. And most importantly, Clint's wrong that it leaves local school boards in charge. It absolutely does not. 5395 transfers control over this comprehensive sex ed curriculum from local school boards to the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, the state bureaucracy overseeing the K-12 education. And that's the main reason that I'm one of the co-sponsors of Referendum 90 that will overturn Senate Bill 5395. I believe that, local school boards, elected school boards, have to have control over their curriculum and not have to submit their plans to approval by the bureaucrats at OSPI. So 5395 is a terrible bill. I would even say it's an unconscionable bill. And I'm very proud to be one of the co-sponsors of Referendum 90 that received a record number of signatures from the citizens of Washington to qualify for this November's ballot. Referendum 90 is a great thing. In November, vote reject on Referendum 90 to overturn Senate Bill 5395.
Thanks, Jim. Marianna, will you speak to that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Joel, will you go ahead and speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a big contrast between myself and my opponent. This bill is wrong for several reasons. One is because parents were not asking for this. Citizens weren't going to lobby legislators in Olympia and say, you know what, we really need to have our 5-year-olds know the scientific name of the sexual organs of boys and girls. I've read the curriculum manual. It's about 4 inches thick. I took pictures with my phone, so I have some text here. I don't know that I'm going to get a chance to read it because I have strong feelings on it, but it's wrong. You can clearly read it and see that it is. And it's, like I said, nobody was asking for this. Teachers weren't asking for this. We have a hard enough time teaching our kids how to read and write and do mathematics, and now we want to add this into the mix. It puts our teachers in a position that they didn't intend to be in. And this is obviously right from Seattle, downtown, LGBTQ, social justice farmhouse, where the liberals have known for decades that if you want to change something, you start with education. You start with the young and the kids. So that's what it is, right here, that it says we're not using him and her. We're using gender neutral names and scenarios, sexual role plays. We use someone with a vulva instead of the word girl or woman, intended to make the curriculum inclusive to all genders. Look, this is obvious what this is. This is just about controlling the narrative, changing definitions of things, and indoctrinating kids for the LGBTQ agenda that's out there. Brian Blake voted for it. I could read pages of this. All I got to read is up to 5th grade, and it was enough to put on TV when they were debating this. It was enough to put on TV when they were debating this for parental warning, when they were debating this in the legislature for this bill. So that shows you how nasty it truly is. I don't agree with the, well, if we need to do this child molestation, that's not what it's about. It's about changing the definitions in the culture.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my opponent is right. If you want to change something, you start with education. And I want to change and reduce teen pregnancy, and I want to reduce child molestation and incest. And these are damaging to our children. And we have got to work together as a community to stop this and prosecute these people and protect these children. I have complete confidence in our local school boards to adopt their own curriculum that they believe is appropriate for their community. And I also, it has the protections of parents can just opt their children out of this particular curriculum. And so with that, I'm confident that this can be done in a way by our local school boards and schools and teachers that is age appropriate and begins to combat these ills of our society that we all hate.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our next question is, should Washington State adopt an income tax? Why or why not? And it looks like, Joel, it's your turn to go first.
All right, I'm going to answer the question, and if I've got time left, I'm going to use it. Heck no, we do not want an income tax. We don't need an income tax. One thing that makes Washington a unique place to live in our union is that we have soundly rejected an income tax, and we will continue to do so. And so long as I'm alive and able to be politically active, I will fight against an income tax. Income tax, which other states have brought in unknowingly as a temporary fix for taxation, always sticks around. I think Utah, about 25, 30 years ago, had a temporary income tax put in, and then it's still there. It's never left. So the people don't want an income tax, and I'm going to continue to fight against that. There are other ways to generate revenue other than chasing successful people out of the state so they go to Florida or Texas. I'm using the remainder of my time to respond to my opponent. I have heard this before about this sex ed bill, that, well, if it's called a straw man, that if you are against this, then you're somehow for molestation, you're somehow in favor of these kinds of things. That's not what this is about. That's not what the bill is about. There's not a shred of evidence to say that this is going to stop incest, molestation, rape, or any kind like that. You have not a single shred of evidence that it's going to do that. And then that's the talking point is, well, the reason I voted for this was because I don't want someone touching children, and that's really wrong. What are you saying? People who are against this bill want that? No, that's not what that's about at all. So that's a ridiculous defense of a bad vote.
Okay, thanks, Joel. All right, Brian, will you go ahead and answer the question about income tax? Why or why not?
I am absolutely strongly opposed to an income tax or a capital gains tax. And I think folks have consistently in the 19th district said no to an income tax. And as their representative, I can intend to honor that and vote no.
Okay. Jim?
Well, I'm joining the chorus of no's on a state income tax. It's a terrible idea. It comes at the wrong time. We're in a recession. This is when we should be cutting tax, not increasing them. But really, a state income tax is a foundational issue in Washington. It's literally in our state's constitution that we prohibit a progressive income tax in the state. So, this has been an issue that our state has debated throughout its history. And our state has really defined itself as a state in terms of our budget processes and as a business environment in our state. We've defined ourselves as a state that doesn't have a state income tax. The reason we have some of the great business and industry in the state that we have, the Boeings, the Microsofts, the Amazons, is that we don't have a state income tax. And that gives us a competitive advantage against other states, certainly on the West Coast and really in the whole country, for attracting and encouraging businesses to grow. And it's one of our great features. It's one of our great strengths, and it's part of our identity, at least in terms of public policy and tax policy, as a state. So I don't want to mess with that at all. And it's also lazy, Stephanie. We don't need to do it. I think we can find other ways to manage our finances in Olympia well. Let's stick with the Constitution. and let's not have a state income tax. And this capital gains tax is really just
15
another way
seconds.
to say state income tax. So no to the income tax, no to the capital gains tax.
Hey, thank you. Clint, how about you?
I'm not in favor of a state income tax. I don't think the majority of Washingtonians are either, but I can tell you that of all the people I've talked to in the district, I'm hearing loud and clear that they do not want a state income tax. So that's not something I'd support. Jim mentioned capital gains. I'm not in favor of a capital gains tax either. I'm concerned that when you try to tax the rich as your sole source of income, they have a way of finding their way out of that, whether that's moving to another state, just finding other ways to get around it. And it leaves our retired population holding the bag. So on that issue, I'm not in favor of capital gains either, but income tax is a non-starter for me. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Marianna.
Fifteen seconds. Time's up.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, which infrastructure projects besides transportation are proposed for the 19th district, and which do you think would be the best drivers for jobs and for our economy? And Jim, it's your turn to begin.
Sure. I think that's pretty easy. I consider high-speed internet access an infrastructure issue. And clearly the 19th has some bald patches where we don't have really high quality, reliable, high-speed internet. So we should consider high-speed internet an infrastructure item, and we should fund it accordingly. And we do. We have the mechanisms in place for funding it in Olympia. I serve on a committee of the legislature, separate of our regular policy committees and budget committees, called the Community Economic Redevelopment Board, or CURB. And CURB administers money for the state in the form of loans and grants for infrastructure projects. We deal a lot in helping ports kind of build their facilities, their roads, their terminals. But we want to make CURB one of the main channels of moving money, capital, from the state, from Olympia out into the districts for high-speed internet development. And if you get into internet, there's a whole bunch of issues to it. You'll hear the term first mile and last mile used when you're talking about funding the development of high-speed internet access. And the last mile is kind of the challenge.
15 seconds.
It can help build out the high-speed connections kind of on the main hubs, but then we need also to encourage private businesses to serve that last mile into people's homes. So this is something we are already funding, but just a little bit. We need to increase the amount of money we spend, probably from 5 or 10 million to something like 50 million budget cycle.
Okay. Marianna, what projects do you think would be the best drivers for jobs and for our economy? Yeah, thank you. Clint, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to disagree about the broadband need. Our district in particular could use it for a variety of reasons. The COVID crisis has really amplified the need for educational usage, but we also have the opportunity for small businesses to start up in areas where they might not be able to do so now. Telemedicine is another big component of that picture. The PUDs with retail authority might be one way to solve some of that last mile problem. The fact is that the providers, the dollars and cents don't pencil out for them to take it to that last house on the road, but we need to view it as a critical infrastructure and make sure it happens. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's expensive, and we have to prioritize, but I think this is one we really certainly should do just that. Mentioning telemedicine though, I think we need to value our public health care infrastructure. We need to make sure that our local hospitals are on solid footing, that we have good, stable providers in the area so people can get the care they need. Thank you.
Okay. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with what's been said about the broadband infrastructure, that the 19th district could sorely use improvement in that area. In the urban areas, we're doing okay, but broadly across the district, it's a problem. So, but secondarily, I think we need to bring a better package to the people of Wahkiakum County for school construction. The school district put out a bond to build and improve their schools there, and it failed badly, rightfully so. The dollars offered by the state in partnership were very under. It was a poor package from the state side. Conversely, up in Oakville, on the other end of the district, we were able to bring in a lot of state dollars, and the community was able to support construction of their school there. And I went by the other day, and construction is happening. That's a big deal. I think a our children are our most important infrastructure, and investing in schools and school construction is right up there at the top. So for both the Stevens School up here in Aberdeen and the Wahkiakum School District, I think bringing a better bond number or dollar number from the state is critical.
Thanks, Brian. Joel?
Everyone took my talking points, so no,
I hate that.
no, we're living in changing times. It's the information age, so we know internet is very important. You know, my grandpa tells me about the times when he was out in the Alokamin. He was at like Camp 2 where he grew up, and they had to pump water by the hand, and if someone had a generator, they had some electricity, but there was no electricity. And he said, you know, it was a real gift to get oranges for Christmas in your stocking, you know. And I just times change, and the things that are available to us, I'm really grateful for what I have. You know, when I was growing up, we had dial-up internet, and I thought, you know, that's the coolest thing, that you can check your email from somewhere else. We're living in a time now where we're faced with that reality, though, that there are these urban centers, Seattle. Now, humans have been collectivizing into urban centers for a long time because about proximity, distance. You want to be close to the goods and services that you want. But in this day of lightning fast shipment and overnight shipment and whatnot, why can't a family move out of the big city, come live in a rural, nice place, spread the humans out just a little bit, and enjoy themselves? And the reason they can't is because the high-speed internet's just simply not there. And so I'm hoping for improvements. I understand that if it's not an all or nothing, like people are saying, the last mile. If we can't get the last mile in this cycle of the political process, are we going to drop our hands and give up and say, well, we tried, but we didn't get the last mile? Can we get half a mile? Can we get 3/4 of a mile? Can we get further than we did before? So I'm looking forward to being part of the process of making internet stronger, faster, and bringing it to more people. I will live to see the day when everybody has internet, and it's and everyone's happy, and we live happily ever after.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you. Our next question is, how will you protect the identity of rural communities from being swallowed up by those big city policies? And it looks like, Brian, it's your turn to start.
Yeah, so, you know, I was doing that yesterday, kind of fighting on the phone with a bunch of folks. Over the last 18 years, I've been fighting Republicans and Democrats who don't understand our rural culture, and have been trying to destroy our fishing industry. And some folks came in from Texas and decided that they were going to scapegoat my communities and destroy commercial fishing. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's been a battle. The tide has turned. After many years, I've finally been able to build a coalition of tribes, commercial fishermen, and some sport fishermen. And that battle has turned, but we're not giving an inch, and we're going to make a difference and protect that rural fishing culture, logging culture. I came out of the logging industry, and boy, it's different now. I left for a few years, and I've been out there recently doing logger safety initiative exams, and it's in many ways the same, but the technology is different, and a lot of good crews out there, and met some good loggers here recently. But natural resources is
15 seconds.
economy, and I intend to protect that.
Thanks, Brian. Marianna, what are you going to do to protect the rural identity? No, we can hear you. Okay. Clint, what are your thoughts?
I think first we need to value what we have. You know, that we have multi-generational families that live in this district, that we're here because we want to be. You know, I love this area. That's why I'm still here. You know, I've had opportunities to move away, but this is where I want to be. And, you know, realizing that these communities were founded on largely logging, you know, fishing, shellfish. These are, you know, it's not just, these aren't just jobs. They're who we are. They're part of our culture. So when we're looking for new opportunities, we need to keep them in mind and realize that we can't let those slip away. They're extremely special to this area. And I think as far as protecting them, number one, you have to include the people that do these type of jobs. You have to ask the loggers when you want to know about logging. You have to make sure that you're having these conversations so you're not having unintended consequences. But I don't believe that anybody, well, some people probably do, but most people aren't looking to reshape what the 19th district is. They're here because they want to be. And certainly I want to help with improvements, but I certainly want to protect what's important as well.
Thank you. Jim?
That's a great question. I mean, this is the reason I ran for the legislature 4 years ago, is we need someone who's really willing to go toe to toe with people pushing agendas that are frankly designed to kill our native industries here. I mean, we can talk about logging, and logging is probably the biggest piece, but the smaller piece that always is important to me are the oyster farmers who have just been suffering because of bad policy intentionally drafted by the Department of Ecology, primarily, some other state agencies too, but mostly ecology. And there's just no other way to say it. The urban, progressive, left bureaucrats who dominate the Department of Ecology at the state level, they want our oyster farmers gone. And there's no other way to put it. And it's the reason I ran. It's what gets me up in the morning, is to do battle with these guys and push back against them and defend our oyster farmers, defend the logging industry that still is here. The trees aren't going anywhere, but is getting just nicked and nicked and nicked and nicked, so that business is less profitable, business is less manageable and maintainable. So what is the fight? The fight is against our native industries in this part of the state, the 19th, versus a bureaucratic monstrosity in Olympia that is biased against exactly the kind of jobs that we like here. And I mean, this is the whole package to me. This is the whole deal. We need to be way more aggressive than we've been in pushing back against these guys, and not be always looking for a compromise solution. We have to draw some lines and say, These industries we will protect, and we will fight hard to keep them viable, alive in our district. And it's not just the money, it's not just the business, it's the culture. It's the families that run a lot of these businesses and pass the knowledge of how to work them from father to son and mother to daughter. We need to protect that and fight hard to protect it.
Thanks, Jim. Joel, I think you're the last one to speak to this question.
Sure am. How am I going to stand up for rural Southwest Washington? Well, I'm going to do it better than my opponent, Brian Blake. So you noticed he said that he's just now, after 18 years of being in the legislature, he has finally coalesced the tribes and the groups and the industries, and everyone is now on the same page. We're ready to finally get the fish and the hunting and the logging going after 18 years of being in the legislature. So I think I can do better than 18 years. Every industry that Brian Blake is a proponent for, logger, hunting, fishing, all of those have been on the decline under his tenure. They're all suffering. And how's fishing going? Are there fish to be caught? How's the logging going? Oh, you gave it away to the spotted owl, the marbled murrelet birds. How's hunting? How are those permits? How is the cost of those permits? So everything that my opponent stands up for is an industry which is inevitably suffering. And I've knocked hundreds of doors and talked to people and said that when they've gone to talk to Brian Blake about these things, he's gone like this and said, don't look at me. It's the Department of Ecology. It's the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Which is the oldest politician trick in the book, is that you bloat these bureaucracies, these bureaucratic entities they're unelected. They run the people out of town, and they have no master, no one to restrain them. And then when they go to their elected representative and say, "Can you do something about this?" You say, "Sorry, I can't. It's them. It's the Department of Ecology. They're the ones doing it." And so if Brian Blake is reelected 2 years from now, you're going to hear the same thing. Well, I just got everything just in place to just get the fish and the hunting up and going again. We're about ready to rock and roll. And so
15 seconds.
that is the promise of politicians since the beginning of time, that we've just turning a corner. We're almost there. We're about to make a change. We have suffered, and the industries have suffered because of the Democrat Party in this state and because of the weak leadership of Brian Blake. And I'm going to be a stronger voice for our industries.
Okay. All right. So we have one final question. And that was my niece. She just popped in to see if I was ready to make s'mores. So we are going to give each of you 2 minutes to share your concluding thoughts, anything you'd like us to know before this debate is over. And Marianna, it is your turn to start.
Seconds.
Thanks, Marianna. Clint, would you take 2 minutes to close?
Sure, thanks. So as I've spoken with voters throughout the district, it's very apparent how much they care about the communities. I don't hear as much people people aren't as concerned about Democrat or Republican. They want the work to get done. And we have to be able to cut through the rhetoric and get to that work. You know, we might disagree on how to get there or what that might look like, but I think in this district, we have a lot more in common than what separates us. And as I've been fortunate, and I know that, and I love this area, and that's why I want to take the skills I've gained and put them back to work for the district. You know, working as a union representative has brought me a lot of experience that I find very valuable, but probably every bit as important is coming up to the blue collar ranks and knowing what it's like to go an apprenticeship route, knowing what it's like to be a person who had to rely on unemployment for short-term needs, or be injured on a job and have to deal with labor and industries and what that looks like, wondering if your family's going to be okay financially, or just trying to figure out if you can afford to stay in the area, if the long-term prospects are good enough, and is this the right place to raise my family? And I'm glad I stayed here, because these communities in our district offer a lot more, in my opinion, for raising a family. This is where I want to be. I love this area and I hope to serve. I appreciate the time tonight and thank you for hosting this.
Thanks, Clint. Joel, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have knocked hundreds of doors. I've called thousands of people in the district. I'm doing it because I want to earn your vote. I care, just like I think everyone else on this panel genuinely cares and has their beliefs about how they think Southwest Washington should best be represented. I can make you this pledge. I will fight tirelessly for you and for our lifestyle here in Southwest Washington. I have this obsessive personality. When I get focused on something, I can't let it go. I fight so hard for the things that I care about and am focused on. I am going to be an unending force of door knocking and phone calling to try and reach out to the voters to let them know that they have someone that they can vote for that will better represent them. When 1639 came around, that anti-gun legislation, I stood against that. My opponent was nowhere to be found. When the sex ed referendum came out to overturn it, I signed it. My opponent voted for it. As he's voted to increase taxes, I'd be voting to decrease taxes. And so I'm much more in lockstep with the spirit of Southwest Washington. And I can make the promise to you that if elected, I will be a warrior, a fighter. I have the warrior spirit. I will fight for you constantly, 24/7 without ending. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Brian, would you like to take a few minutes to wrap up?
Certainly. Thanks for the invitation. I've been working hard for you, and I'm asking you tonight to rehire me for the job. I have broad support from the ag community. I'm Farm Bureau Legislator of the Year this year, due to years of work for the farming community. I'm a member of the Hunters Heritage Council Hall of Fame, and typically every year an annual award winner from Hunters Heritage. Broad support from the labor community, strong support in the business community. I'm a balanced legislator that tries to work with everybody to solve problems, and so it's something I want to continue. I'm proud of the work we've done on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee that I chair, and I will continue to try and find and bring dollars back to the district to improve our community. So thank you for the invitation tonight.
Thanks, Brian. And Jim, will you wrap us up tonight?
Sure, Steph. Thanks. And I said on social media that I really like these forums. We're doing them by Zoom this time, and previous cycles we've done them live, usually at the Grange Hall or somewhere like that. I think these forums are great. They may be the best that we do anymore, and it's because they're set up in a bipartisan way, and the organization is just clean and clear, and it's one of my favorite spots on the election circuit. So, and I mean that, it really is great. We live in a fantastic place, a place worth fighting for, full of people who are worth fighting for. And it's going to be a fight the next couple of years. The budget stuff, I know it's a little dry to some people, but it's going to be a real issue for this state. We've got to trim our sails and adjust for this recession that's been, we haven't had a recession in more than a decade. And we'll survive this. We'll get through it. And we won't cut any essential services. One of the metrics you can look in the budget stuff is that budgets have been growing so fast in Olympia. All we have to do to make up the current shortfall is cut back to about the 2017 level. That's not that long ago. And we can do that without creating a great deal of hardship, really any hardship on any regular person. Some bureaucrats might be sore, but that's okay. I like the fight. I like fighting for this part of the state. I like mixing it up in Olympia. I like mixing it up with the governor. I like mixing it up with ecology. I like mixing it up with the state attorney general. And I intend to continue to do that for the people of this district. And I think we'll continue to do well, both in terms of bringing projects here and in just making your life better, making your life simpler, getting rid of the red tape and the madness, and letting you work a job, raise a family, and live the life you want to live.
Thanks, Jim. A big thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to especially thank each of you as candidates. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for taking a risk, for being willing to participate in this webinar, and for telling the people of Wahkiakum County what you believe. I'd also like to thank the Wahkiakum County Democratic and Republican parties for being willing to work together to host this forum. The YouTube recording will remain up until the primary election is over. The YouTube channel is called Wahkiakum R&D Team. And all of the other prior events are also posted there. So to all of you that are watching out there, please remember to vote. Encourage everyone you know to vote. And remember, your ballots are due August 4th. Stay safe. Good night. And thanks again. We appreciate you. See you guys.